All right, so today we are diving into a fascinating dynamic. Sure. When it comes to relationships, and we got to talk about Gemini and Scorpio compatibility. That pairing that's known for its passionate highs and, well, let's just say intense lows.
It's almost like a classic case of opposites attract, wouldn't you say? We're talking about air and water signs here. Gemini, the airy social butterfly. And then you have Scorpio, that deep feeling water sign. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Creates quite the intriguing mix.
Intriguing is one way to put it. And speaking of intriguing, our source describes a Gemini-Scorpio sexual relationship as a connection of the deepest and the highest point on planet Earth. Now, that's some pretty vivid imagery, right? But what does it actually tell us about how these two connect?
Well, on the surface, it might seem paradoxical. Because you have Scorpio craving a deep, that soul-merging kind of intimacy. They want to know everything about their partner to delve into those hidden depths. And then on the other hand, you have Gemini, who thrives on variety and playfulness. They approach intimacy with a sense of curiosity and lightheartedness.
So are we really talking about a fundamental mismatch here? Like, are their needs just fundamentally incompatible?
Not necessarily. It's more about understanding their different approaches to intimacy. You see, for Scorpio, intimacy is about vulnerability. It's about letting someone completely in. They crave that intensity, that feeling of merging with another soul. Gemini, on the other hand, often expresses intimacy through communication, through witty banter, sharing ideas. They might not wear their heart on their sleeve the same way Scorpio does.
Which is where that whole trust issue comes into play, right? The source definitely doesn't shy away from highlighting that.
Exactly. Because you have Scorpio. That will dive headfirst into a relationship, offering their whole heart without reservation. And then you have Gemini, who can be much more cautious. They might take longer to open up fully, to reveal their vulnerabilities.
And that can really rub a Scorpio the wrong way.
It can. The source uses the phrase first worm of suspicion when describing how a Scorpio reacts to a perceived breach of trust. And believe me, with their intuitive nature and their ability to read people so well, Scorpios tend to pick up on things that others might miss.
Okay, so trust is huge here. But what about communication? You would think with Gemini being the communicator of the zodiac, things would flow smoothly.
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. You see, Geminis are all about expressing themselves openly, freely, and oftentimes verbally. They're the masters of conversation and can talk about anything under the sun. Scorpios, though, communicate on a much deeper, more nuanced level. Remember, this is a water sign. They communicate through feelings, through subtle cues, and yes, sometimes even through those infamous riddles.
So we've got Gemini, who's an open book, and Scorpio, who's speaking in some kind of secret code. I can see how that could lead to some misunderstandings.
Precisely. Imagine a Gemini trying to have a straightforward conversation with a Scorpio who's hinting at their feelings, expressing themselves indirectly. It can be frustrating for both partners. But here's the thing.
I'm listening.
This difference in communication styles can actually work in their favor if they learn to appreciate it. A Gemini brings lightheartedness and a fresh perspective, encouraging Scorpio to kind of open up and share their thoughts. Meanwhile, Scorpio's depth and ability to read between the lines can help Gemini look beyond the surface and connect on a deeper emotional level.
So it's all about finding that right balance. It's about learning each other's language. But what happens when those communication breakdowns do occur? How do their emotional differences play out in those moments of conflict?
Well, that's where things can get really heated. Remember how we talked about Scorpio's intensity? This sign feels everything deeply. When they're hurt, they hurt deeply. And when they're angry, well, let's just say you don't want to be on the receiving end of that Scorpio sting.
And a Gemini, with their light and breezy approach to life, probably has a hard time understanding that kind of emotional intensity.
It can be a real clash of styles. And our source actually describes potential conflict as ruining their sex life and giving them both a headache. Now, that's putting it bluntly, but it really gets the point across.
Ouch, a headache's right.
Yeah.
I think we all know that feeling when emotional tension starts to seep into every aspect of a relationship.
Exactly. And it's in these moments that a Gemini might feel overwhelmed by a Scorpio's strong emotions, like they're drowning in feelings they don't quite understand. On the flip side, a Scorpio might perceive Gemini's more detached approach as a lack of care or concern.
So what's the solution then? Is it even possible for these two to navigate these emotional differences without constantly triggering each other?
It's definitely not easy, but it is possible, with understanding and a willingness to compromise, you see. The source emphasizes that it's not about changing each other's emotional styles, but rather about accepting and appreciating those differences. Easier said than done right.
Way easier. Especially when you're talking about Such fundamentally different ways of experiencing the world.
Hmm.
But let's say we have this Gemini-Scorpio pair. They're committed to making it work. They've acknowledged their differences. They're learning each other's communication styles. Are there any areas where this couple, this combination, might actually thrive? Because right now it just sounds kind of like a recipe for disaster.
Don't lose hope just yet. Remember how we talked about Scorpio's love of transformation and Gemini's constant quest for change? Well, those seemingly different approaches can actually work in harmony.
Wait, really? I'm kind of having a hard time picturing it.
Yeah.
It seems like they're on totally different wavelengths when it comes to change. Like Gemini's changing their hair color on a whim, while Scorpio's out there like making these radical life changes and never looking back.
You're not wrong. But think of it this way. The source talks about Gemini taking small steps towards Scorpio's grand goals. Imagine Scorpio with their intense focus and determination to transform, and then you have Gemini with their adaptability and endless ideas, helping them to get there. It's almost like Gemini provides the wind beneath Scorpio's wings, you know?
Okay, I think I'm starting to see it. So instead of clashing, their approaches to change can actually complement each other.
Precisely. Scorpio brings the intensity and the drive to transform, while Gemini brings that flexibility and the willingness to explore new avenues. They can actually help each other grow in ways they never thought possible. And this dynamic can play out in so many different aspects of their lives, from career goals to personal growth.
That's actually a really cool way to look at it. But
Yeah.
even with all this potential for growth, we can't ignore the fact that this pairing is known for its challenges, right? So for those brave souls who are drawn to this dynamic, what does the source suggest is the key to making it actually work?
Well, it doesn't sugarcoat it. The source definitely emphasizes that this is not a relationship for the faint of heart. It takes work, understanding, and a willingness to embrace the paradox of it all.
Paradox, huh? So we're talking about two signs that can clash in every way imaginable, but also have this weird potential for growth and transformation.
Exactly. It's that push and pull, that constant dance between light and shadow that makes this relationship so compelling and potentially explosive.
Okay, so maybe not for everyone, but for those who are really drawn to this dynamic, what's the key takeaway? What do they really need to remember if they want to make this thing work?
I think the source puts it best when it talks about the enormous capacity for personal growth that this pairing offers. The challenges are definitely real, but so are the rewards. If both partners are willing to learn from each other, to stretch outside their comfort zones, and embrace that messy, complicated beauty of it all, then who knows? They might just surprise themselves.
Embrace the messy, complicated beauty. I like that. It's
Yeah.
not about trying to fit into some, perfect mold. It's about finding beauty in the imperfections and the differences. It makes you wonder if maybe that's actually where the real growth happens, right?
Yeah,
We can step outside of our comfort zones and really embrace what makes us different.
absolutely. Because let's face it, relationships aren't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who challenges you, who pushes you to grow, and helps you become the best version of yourself.
And it seems like with the Gemini-Scorpio pairing, there's no shortage of challenges or opportunities for growth. But for our listener who's out there, maybe wondering if they're up for the task, is there anything else that the source offers in terms of navigating this dynamic?
Well, the source hints at a really crucial point that I think bears repeating. It says that for a Gemini and Scorpio to truly thrive, they need to avoid falling into the trap of trying to change each other. It's about understanding and accepting those fundamental differences that we talked about.
Which, let's be real, it's probably easier said than done when you're talking about a sign that thrives on this deep emotional connection. Yeah, a sign that needs its freedom and independence.
Exactly. It's a very delicate dance. But it all comes back to communication and respect. A Gemini can show a Scorpio that they care by making an effort to understand their emotional depths, by being present and engaged when Scorpio needs to talk. And a Scorpio can respect a Gemini's need for space and independence without perceiving it as a lack of commitment.
So it sounds like the real key to making this pairing work is all about finding that balance. A balance between air and water, between light and shadow, between freedom and depth.
You got it. And when they do find that balance, when they learn to appreciate and celebrate their differences, they can create something truly extraordinary.
Well, I think we've given our listener a lot to think about today if you're out there navigating the exciting and challenging, and let's face it, sometimes messy world of a Gemini-Scorpio relationship. We hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights.
And remember, every relationship has its challenges. It's about finding someone who's worth the effort, someone who pushes you to grow and evolve, even when it's not always easy.
So, until next time, keep exploring those connections and keep diving deep.